Hello and welcome to The Public Good. This is Dejia James from Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, uniting over 380 organizations to make a better Buffalo Niagara region. Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome to the new season of The Public Good, and we're getting rocking and rolling right away with local initiatives that matter to Buffalo specifically. PPG works really hard to do policy and research that affects us as Western New Yorkers, and so we want to start off the top of the year with an initiative that has been affecting the Buffalo area for decades and even generations now. And I'm really excited to have Queen City Forward on the podcast today to talk about the 33 Kensington project from the perspective of New York State Department of Transportation. I want to give a few disclaimers before we get into the episode. As a part of PPG's community agenda process, East Side Parkways Coalition has been #1 on our agenda in 2025 and is on our agenda for 2026. We are doing this episode today to talk specifically about the project overall from all perspectives, and we're talking with the Department of Transportation Queen City Forward specifically today, and not any specific community groups. We welcome feedback. Please comment, like, share these videos, and also make sure you follow Queen City Forward on all social media. I'm going to make sure that's linked in the description. And the reason we're here today is because they're having public hearings and they want to hear from you, everyone in the community. And so we're here to have a discussion about how everyone in the community can get involved in this process and get their voice heard. So thank you so much for getting through that little spiel. But I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves. I'm so excited for you both to be here today. So either you want to start just who you are, where you're from.
Sure. So I'm super excited to be here. Let me just say, first and foremost, I've been on the PPG podcast once before, but this way before you guys are doing it the way you're doing it now. So shout out to y'all. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So I'm Taje Jenkins-Jones. I'm from Buffalo. I'm from the East Side. I actually grew up on Langmeyer Street. I lived there until I was maybe about 22 years old. Went to Buffalo public schools, all on the East Side. My grandparents are from. So I have a really strong relationship with the city of Buffalo. I also spent a lot of time on the West Side and a couple other parts of the city. Just worked within the community, doing community organizing and working with different nonprofit organizations, and as well as working at UB. But now I'm here at the DOT, and I'm super duper excited to talk about this initiative today with you guys. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right.
And I'm Ryan Whalen. I am the Public Information Officer for New York State DOT in Region 5, which is the 4 Western New York counties, Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Erie, and Niagara County. I was not born in the city of Buffalo. I was born in Lockport, so don't blame me for being 35 miles away. But I did live in the city for quite some time. Not anymore. I'm in Kenmore now. But if if you've ever been to doctor's offices or Tim Hortons, you may have seen me for the last 15 years until May of 2025. I was working for Spectrum News as a political reporter. I did cover this some. I spent a lot of time covering issues that matter to the city of Buffalo, and I'm happy to be on the other side and try to really get a transformative project done now.
That's great. Thank you so much. Like, what a dynamic duo to have to kind of be running this initiative on behalf of the state DOT on a more local regional level. And boiling that down to the local regional level, what is the Queen City Forward initiative, and what are you guys hoping to go into this year doing with the community and doing with these kind of public hearing spaces? What are you guys' goals?
Feedback. Honestly, we want to know how the community feels and what their experience with the 33 has been like. And that's not one question, right? So what is super important about the listening sessions that we've been doing, I know we're probably going to chat about that in more in depth, is that these were created with the intention of giving the community a voice that they didn't feel like they had before.
Absolutely. And I think, and you guys have been kind of around and doing the community initiative thing like for the past year or more, right? Like, you're not a new initiative necessarily. So how are you kind of reintroducing yourself to community or trying to get more people involved into this initiative?
Well, the Kensington Expressway project has been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
You've talked about it before. There have been members of the community that have talked about it not just years, but decades. The project progressed to where it progressed, and I know you've been involved with East Side Parkways, which was involved in a lawsuit that to some extent halted where the project was before. We're not here to relitigate that, because what the big thing that we got away from the litigation was we didn't have the community consensus to move forward with the project as proposed at that point.
Yeah.
So we said we got to reset the playbook.
Absolutely.
And go out and talk to people. And so what we're really trying to get across is nothing is decided. There is no project right now, but we want to do something. So how do we do that? We got to get everybody in the same room and talking about what the community, what Buffalo, what Western New York wants to do. And so this is really sort of our first step to sort of reset, get everybody back in the room and figure out how we can get that consensus.
Absolutely. And I just want to update our listeners. If you're not kind of all caught up to date on where the 33 Kensington project is, Ryan mentioned a lawsuit. Just for a brief synopsis, last year, there was a court ruling, actually a year ago from now, in January 2025, that the process had to be halted and started over. It was, sorry, I'm going to read the details, from the Erie County Supreme Court Judge Emilio Koliakovo, thank you, that stated more environmental review was necessary for the $1.5 billion cap or tunnel idea that a lot of people are maybe familiar with, that was proposed as the project before. And so because of that court ruling, that project had to be essentially scrapped. And we have a brand new process beginning all over again from scratch to figure out what the best project is for the 33 Kensington Expressway and Humboldt Parkway as well.
Can I touch on that just a little bit?
Please.
Because that's one of the misconceptions kind of that we're hearing, and it doesn't really matter that much because, like I said, we don't need to relitigate.
Absolutely.
We could have either challenged that ruling,
Yeah.
or we could have moved forward with the environmental impact study that the judge ordered on the project that was proposed, the tunnel project. But the state, the commissioner decided that's not the way to go forward if we don't have the consensus. We're not just going to push a project through for the sake of pushing a project through. So this process that we're doing now was not necessarily ordered by the judge. The judge ordered an environmental impact statement. We're saying we need to figure out what the project is before we do the environmental impact statement.
Thank you for that clarification, because it kind of, shows some sort of benefit that the New York State Department of Transportation is trying to give the community in the sense of, okay, we had a project here. It seems like there's not really consensus. We could just go about it this way, but let's just actually just start again. Let's figure out from the base level, what do people need? What do they want, right? And I think that's a really admirable type of initiative to try and undertake, and really a difficult one, especially when we know there's kind of not necessarily community consensus completely 100% on what should be done or what should not be done. And so you guys are giving yourself kind of a big plate to try and fill here a little bit. But I want to go into some of the next questions. So as you said, you're kind of starting all over again with this court ruling. You're saying there's no project idea at all right now. You're starting completely from step one.
It's completely from the drawing board. And so let me just a couple things, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of caveats to why we're even changing this process, right? So Ryan and I, upon beginning with the DOT, we went to Syracuse and we got to do a live case study on how they were able to make their project work.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise, all the small towns in Buffalo have a lot of the same issues and a lot of the same community dynamics. So, when people from Albany come in and they say, hey, we're doing it like this, people in the community sometimes push back because of whatever historical reasons, right? So us going to Syracuse, we really learned how they did it, and that put a huge emphasis on community outreach. They have 2 outreach centers strategically placed in their community, specifically because of access, right? One is on the project line, one is downtown, centrally located. But they have figured out a way to make those work with the community, and they've turned a lot of their biggest critics into some of their biggest champions. So upon walking back into this, we took a lot of time litigating exactly what Ryan just talked about. We had to decide what direction we were going with it, and we decided that as opposed to attempting to keep running at that wall and hoping a piece of cheese pops up in front of us, we're going to start from the drawing board, and we're going to actually put the community first. We're going to let the community come and say how they feel. Now, what's special about the listening sessions is that these are DOT listening sessions. So it's not quite your traditional listening session where we're passing microphones. We are looking for raw data. We're looking to really find issues, not just with what the project can be, but issues that people are having that we wouldn't be focusing on if we didn't have this project in the footprint. We want to know about the crashes. We want to know about the traffic issues, the congestion, if your kids can ride their bike across the street because you have an off ramp. You know, things like that are the stuff that matter just as much as what the project will be. Sorry to hit the mic so many times.
No, it's okay. Absolutely. And I hit the mic all the time. But I love that you mentioned Syracuse, because in PPG's role, we're researchers, right? And so when we work on policy initiatives, we often look to other cities, states, municipalities, whatever, that have successfully done what we're trying to do. Because why, like you said, reinvent the wheel. So to mention that Rochester and Syracuse both have had successful highway removal initiatives that have been accepted by community, that have included community input. And so we were starting last year to look at that, that type of model, as well as other models, because of urban renewal and the history of that. There's cities and municipalities all over the country that are trying to right the wrongs of certain transportation decisions that were made. And so we're at such a pivotal historical, really, moment in Buffalo's history to say, we have a project that the state, a government entity, wants to work with the community on. How can we do this in the best way, which wasn't the approach in the 50s and 60s, right? And so the fact that an initiative like this is taking place is really huge. And we really just need to take a moment to kind of like benchmark that a little bit more, and for people to then participate. Because like we said, we haven't had that opportunity in the past. And so when we talk about co-governance, when we talk about community-centered policy, these are the type of initiatives that we seek from government offices. So I want to mention that your next listening session, because we're speaking about listening sessions and I haven't said the next date, is January 22nd. So for those listening to this conversation, please make sure you show up. And that January 22nd date is going to be in Cheektowaga, correct?
Cheektowaga Senior Center, yep.
Okay, wonderful. And so I want to ask, because there's some that are like, well, I thought this was a Humboldt Parkway thing and that's in the city and that's the east side. Why are you in Cheektowaga, right? So can we answer that question for some folks who are interested in why you're kind of going all over the region, including suburbs?
Absolutely. As someone who has walked the entire city of Buffalo on foot, and I mean that in the most literal sense.
I've done it with you, but yeah.
Right. You know. So it's to your traditional East Sider. There's not a lot of like limitation as to where the East Side is, right? We know what we consider the East Side, where our community is. So I think that the idea that moving around would make it less accessible when we talk about, and if I could be, direct, I think about our community. If we want to go to the mall, we can get to the mall. You know what I mean? If we want to go to a grocery store and if we need to go to a grocery store and travel to do it, we figure out ways to do that. So I think it's less about if it's accessible on foot or if it's accessible by car, and it's more about how it energizes our community to even put the plan forward to get there. And that's what we want. We want as many people there as possible, so we have to move around. And the notion that, someone who lives on Decker can't get to Broadway, because that's where the Cheektowaga location is for the upcoming session. It's right after you go past Bailey and Broadway. If you keep going down Broadway, you'll be there shortly after. So it is accessible in a sense, but we have to also look at how this affects the capacity of the region as a whole. So that is the other piece to it, right? It's this idea that more opportunities creates more opportunities for voices to be heard. So if you can't make this one, but hey, I'm off on the 22nd, maybe I can make it to the one on Broadway and make a plan to get there earlier than I normally might be able to. That's what it's really about.
That's why we're doing as many as we're doing, and we're doing a lot of them. We've done 2 so far, and we've got a bunch planned. Taje has been working really hard to try to secure a bunch of different places all over Western New York. Yes. For me, Cheektowaga is the logical next step, because you're literally just going down Broadway, right, from the east side into Cheektowaga. A lot of people have moved from the east side of Cheektowaga, right?
Exactly.
So we hit that. You have the second point where we do need to talk to the commuters that use the Kensington Expressway, and people say why or how is it going to be weighted, and the people who live along the Kensington Expressway are an important voice, and they're not being diminished by us doing that. But when people ask me, I say, this project impacts people to a certain extent. We're going to be, if we were to talk about a fill-in option, we would be legally required to go out and talk to these commuters. So, and I tell people, you've seen enough projects in the city of Buffalo that have got to the 9th inning, and then somebody walks in and says, I don't like this anymore, and it stalls. So why would we want to wait till the 9th inning when we know that we're going to have to go out and talk to everybody? Let's not hide that. Let's go out and talk to everybody. On the same point, though, we hear you. We hear you when you say we live in Humboldt and some of us can't drive there, and why aren't you holding it there? We hear you. We're having meetings all over. That's feedback that we're hearing, and we'll get there. And we're doing everything we can to make this accessible to everybody. So this is a process, and we're gonna be out there, and you're gonna see us.
Absolutely. And obviously you're holding multiple sessions, right? And so I think the other question is, how long is this listening period, quote unquote, going to go for? I don't know if you guys have a rough idea of that kind of timeline. Is it through this year? Is it 6 months? Is it the first quarter of the year? If you have any kind of idea when, what is this listening period? And as a project progresses, is the listening kind of a throughout the process type of deal, rather than just we're listening in the beginning, we'll take your notes, and then we'll go do what we have to do?
From the beginning, we knew that. I'll say this, right? So we start the listening sessions with the intent on giving the community a voice, getting an idea how people feel. One conversation we had very early on following the first session is, we're going to get a lot of data. What are we going to do with that? Right now, we're still deciding the best way to present that, because transparency is important for us, right? We don't have anything at this moment that we're ready to present to the community, but we've also only had 2 sessions. So I think what's important is diverse voices, getting a decent pool of people to actually pull information from to get an idea of how folks are feeling in the area. But creating strategy from there. This listening session is not your typical governmental required process for any sort of study or anything that we might need to do. This is something that we as a team said, let's do this because we don't want to waste any time when we get to public meetings. At that point, when we hit public meetings, we should really be getting to the meat and potatoes of things, really talking about where this is going. We should not still have to wonder how does the community feel? So that's, I think, the biggest piece of all of this is that because of the feedback we got from the community, and because we would love to be as transparent as possible, it's important for us to have this process that clearly delineates, well, what is the community thinking? What is the community perspective on this? And that's going to be diverse, because guess what? People who live on the Humboldt don't want the 33 to go. People who live on the Humboldt might want the 33 to go. People who live on the Humboldt may have a diverse idea. People who live in the suburbs may feel either way about that. Just because a person doesn't live within the footprint doesn't mean they can't empathize with the feelings of the people in that area. However, what I think is important is that when we look at a project that took over 40 years to actually even be created, it's not going to be righted and fixed in 2 years. You know what I mean? We have to be mindful and thoughtful about how we really engage the community in this process, or it isn't worth the time.
Well, what was the mistake the first time around, right?
Yeah.
That it's rushed, that it, in any project, honestly, you could say, right? That it's rushed, that we didn't think about the consequences. That's what we're doing now. We're gonna take the time. We're not gonna hurry this. And I know it's been years for a lot of people. It's been decades for others. But that doesn't mean you rush it now and do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I understand that that's frustrating for people to hear that have been waiting, but it's still necessary. This is a process. This is a process that we're moving toward that EIS. We're doing separately a traffic study. Right now we're in the process. And then separately we're doing these listening sessions. I was on with Nate Benson from Channel 2, and I think he described it as extra credit. It's not quite extra credit because we think it's necessary because we got to figure out what the project is. But where he's right is with the federal government and the state, there are some necessary things that you do with regards to outreach that happen when you do a project like this. And they're legally required. And there's a lot of people that are studying all of the laws and rules right now because they're involved in this process. And I think what we're doing confuses them because They want to say, how does that fit into what you're legally required to do or where we are in the process timeline?
Right.
And this is before that process timeline.
Right.
So this is what can we do building up to that so that we're ready to go when we hit, when we really press the gas, you know?
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because I know, I reached out to some folks like, what questions would you have? What do you want to know? And people definitely were like, okay, well, the ruling was about an EIS. So what does this have to do with the EIS? Should we be coming with environmental concerns? Like, should we be saying really specific things that are only environmental? But I think, as Taje mentioned before, like, no, we want to know that kids can't cross the street because there's an off ramp like near a school or whatever. Like, we need to know all of the information. How is this affecting you? And I want to return to the point of why talk to the first string suburbs, right? Because I really want to nail this home, that part of the reason why this whole thing has occurred was because of the creation of the suburbs, right? And so as the Department of Transportation's responsibility is to study traffic flow, to try and make sure it's, the best for everyone in the region. It's a regional type of viewpoint and project. If there are people saying that they need to get downtown, or on the other end, if the best grocery stores and the mall and the shops are outside of the city in the first string suburbs, how are people in the city then accessing those points as well? And so I personally, and I would just go on a limb personally, think saying that this highway is only for suburbanites is completely incorrect perspective, right? There are many people, Buffalonians, East Siders, Black people that use the Kensington 33 Expressway. Like, let's just...
I went to Mackay. It's right off the 33. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have made it to class a couple times if it wasn't right off the 33. I get it.
Just, we have to be real about who uses it and why, right? And so accessibility to the suburbs is just as important as accessibility to downtown, right? And so we need to talk about that, as well as to the airport, right?
Well, we're asking people because we know that people are impacted differently depending on where they live and how they use it. And we want to get that down on paper.
Absolutely. It also changed the drive times for firefighters. It changed the drive times for ambulances, police response. All of those, I think those emergency moments, response times then start to increase. Outside of just the general travel time
Nobody thinks about that.
You don't.
Nobody thinks about that.
We have to think about that. That's why we have to take some time. And we have to think about, when we say, where are the cars going to go? I saw someone say, well, you put the 70,000 cars there in the first place, so that's not our problem where the car's going to go. That maintaining a problem you created. Okay. But they're going to go somewhere. We need to know so that we don't create cars idling in these communities that we're trying to help, that we don't create an unsafe situation where children are trying to cross the street in communities that we're talking about that have already bared the brunt of some of these issues from the past. So that's why we say, when we don't want to hurry this, because we can't take one thing that the community sees as a problem and then create another one.
Yeah, and I just want to say, on another personal note, I get personal sometimes on these episodes, like, in terms of where the cars are going to go, we're talking about, some people are talking about moving all of the cars to the streets. Wonderful. They'll be back in the neighborhoods. People will go to local shops again and butchers. And I don't really know what they're necessarily imagining, but it's reimagining a neighborhood in a more economically friendly, accessible way. Sure. But we're talking about adding, what did we say, 70,000 cars to the streets that in the wintertime aren't even plowed, that aren't salted correctly, sidewalks, that the city of Buffalo has not figured out how to get a manage on yet, right? And so all of those things have to be thought about when we're talking about, this project. And like I said, some of those were personal anecdotes and thoughts from me, Dejia James. So I just want to, point that out for anybody sending this to my boss or anybody else. I want to kind of just come back and come back into the listening sessions themselves. What have the listening sessions looked like so far? What can people expect when they come to a listening session? Like you said, it's not necessarily your traditional pass the mic around. So What does a listening session look like?
So can I say, I think that the biggest perk to the listening sessions, and this is part of the breakdown of it, is that it does not require any specific allotted amount of time out of your day. Other than you coming and participating, it is a session where we are continuously taking feedback. Although you can't stand on this table and, talk to the crowd right now, there's opportunities to have one-on-one conversations with our head engineer. You know, the first session we saw the commissioner. We had a number of high-profile DOT employees who felt it extremely important to be present and are hearing one-on-one conversations. I think that those one-on-one opportunities to connect and have things explained or explain your point of view and your feelings help inform overall how we make decisions. So this particular setup is you come in, you know, you check in, you sign in like any kind of session. We give you a comment card and we give you some sticky notes. The sticky notes are meant to be able to comment directly on the boards that we have. The boards change every session. We actually take these boards, we're photocopying these boards. None of this data is being thrown into an incinerator. It is not like, there's no Simpsons outcomes here, right? It's all like documented and it's taken seriously. And we spend a lot of time talking about the feedback that we get, right? That's why we know it's important to continue doing this. The listening session as a whole, though, again, if you got 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it is not something that you have to dedicate the entire 2 hours to, which is what I like about the process, because your typical public information meeting, is done in a very specific way, right? For a number of reasons, but it's done in a specific way. Mm-hmm. So there's a presentation that you have to be present for.
Right.
You missed the presentation, you have no idea what the project looks like. You know what I mean? You miss this piece, you can't give your feedback. You have to wait for the next one. When is the next one? So these listening sessions are really us filling in the cracks for those moments. Once we get to, again, I'm going to keep beating this dead horse, but once we get to that moment, we want to be able to say, let's have a higher level conversation. We know it's not safe because of this. How can we fix that outside of just this one solve to it? And then I also want to say that, like, this is our, like, measure twice, cut once approach to things. And it's super important that we don't, like, lose that piece. We are being intentional about getting feedback from folks with these sessions.
Absolutely. And I think the other question that I've gotten feedback from community is, you know, are you at a point in this stage where you're working with any kind of city officials as of yet, where you're getting feedback from the city of Buffalo? Because I think some people have felt like the city of Buffalo hasn't necessarily been as involved or upfront in perspective and narrative as they could or should be.
Yes, we are. With the city of Buffalo, that's a little hard because the new mayor has been in for, what's today? You know,
couple days, less than a week. Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna be involved, and I've heard the new mayor talk about this, and it's good to hear. It's good to hear that the city wants to be involved with this, and we welcome them to be involved, because I believe, and I think the state believes, that you need to have that political will and the people out in front pushing for something to get a project like this to happen. It can't just be the agency. And we are going to be talking with the city of Buffalo, and we're going to see how we can fold them into this project. We'll be the lead on the project. NYSDOT knows how to do these projects. You talked about Syracuse and Rochester. We were out there doing that, but we want Buffalo involved. And we're getting other politicians involved. We were just out with Cheektowaga Supervisor Brian Nowak a couple days ago, bringing him posters. We said, "Can I bring you some posters so that you can put them around and help us get the message out?" And he was welcoming. Talked a little bit about his own personal opinion. I won't speak for him, but basically he said, "I want to make sure that people know we should all get out and talk about this." I said, thank you, because that's what our message is. And we're going to do that as we work around to other communities too. I think it's important to have the electeds involved in this project. Why would you not want to be involved with something that could be so transformative for not just Buffalo, but for the entire region?
Exactly. Yeah. Can I expand on
Please.
what Ryan said? I'm so happy you lined this up for me, because I wanted to say, and I was going to try to sneak this in either way, but to his point, right? The collaboration is important. The interdependence is important. We have to also take the time to understand how governmental agencies work, right? The work that they do in the areas that they can improve. And that's not me like chastising anybody's approach to how they want to advocate for this project. What I'm saying is, think about what you need and what you're asking for, and who can really bring that to fruition for you. Because the DOT is not going to be able to do everything. We can't build hospitals. Somebody can. Somebody can, somebody can pave streets. Somebody, we're in the city of, like, get up and do it. If nobody else is doing it, we're going to get up and do it. So I would really love to see the conversation change to who else should be at the table, not what can we do to solve every issue. Because we can be a very important player in solving a lot of problems, but we can't solve every problem.
Absolutely. And I think PPG definitely takes that approach in trying to inform the community and partners on what level of government and what government agencies should they be talking to about what problems. Because often people don't know who to approach or what appropriate entity to approach to address their need, right? And so that's why I really wanted to emphasize for this episode that as representatives from New York State Department of Transportation, their main goal is a regional approach to transportation and vehicular as well as people flow, like the flow of and movement of people and residents and people who live in the Western New York region, right? But some of the other issues that we've seen, are definitely issues that we should be talking to the city about. We need better paved roads. We need better avenues and thoroughfares and in the city to have other traffic type of flows and things like that. Those are different conversations that we can be having with the city of Buffalo, while tangentially also speaking with the Department of Transportation about maybe we do want a park. Maybe we do want Humboldt to kind of be restored to its historical, glory and things like that. But who should we be talking to about these different issues and making sure that we actually are showing up to speak when people are inviting you to speak and not just waiting till the end when there's a project made and then you just want to come and say, oh, well, I don't like that. Be a part of the process to create what you want to see in your community. And so I really want to stress again that the next listening session is going to be January 22nd at the Cheektowaga Senior Center.
Senior Center, yep.
Correct. So please make sure that you do show up. What time? I don't think we said the time.
5 to 7.
5 to 7, January 22nd. On Broadway.
Right in the complex where the Cheektowaga Town Hall is.
Okay, well, so there you go. That's going to be the next one. And like I said, follow Queen City Forward on socials, Facebook, Instagram. You can Google it. They even have a website so that you can be staying up to date. They're going to be having a lot more hearings, like they said. So this isn't your only chance. If you're not available January 22nd or you're like, dang, I don't know, that's a little soon. Make sure you stay tuned for updates. And I just want to thank you both so much for coming on the show. I don't know if there's just any other last anecdotes that you would like to add, but I just appreciate you guys being the face of kind of a difficult initiative to be in the community with.
I'll say, first of all, thank you for having us, because the most important thing we can do right now is get the message out and get people to the meetings. Really, getting involvement is our biggest goal right now without a project in front of us. The last thing I'll say, and it's something that I've been pushing the whole time, is, we talk about filling and tunnel a lot, but this is not a binary choice. It doesn't have to be. Nothing's off the table. The tunnel's not gone. Fill-in's an option, but there could be other things too. So come and talk about whatever you wanted to talk about. We've had a lot of people talk about light rail. We're not the NFTA. That would be something that the NFTA has to come in on. But we certainly put up multimodal, public transportation. What do you want? Come and talk to us about it. Let's see where we can get.
Absolutely. And I love that you said it's not necessarily a binary choice, because I think people do feel that way. I've also felt some kind of tension or anxiety from the community that, well, if we don't do something quickly, we're going to lose the money or the project's going to go away or whatever. So I'm glad you're here to kind of like quell some of those fears, recenter everyone of like, no, we're having a brand new conversation, and for people to really understand that this project is starting again, and it's your opportunity to be a part of creating this project. And there are other things, like you said, that are going to be required, a new environmental impact statement, other things that are kind of legislatively, legally required from the Department of Transportation's processes. But this is a special part of the process that frankly isn't necessarily heard of before, that we have the opportunity to take part in. So anything else you got to like to say?
Wow, I'm long-winded.
Go ahead.
No, I want to say that I think, number one, the one thing that I don't want to leave here without mentioning is that we do, have a new team that's taking the lead on this project. And I myself, even as someone that works directly within the DOT, have been pleasantly surprised at how equity-minded people at the table are, how community-minded people at the table are. So I don't want anyone at home to think that the people that are at the table aren't considering how long it's going to take you to get the tops, right? Or whether or not you have breathing issues as you grow up as a child, or if you're, safety, whatever the situation is. All those things are always at the table. We're always talking about them. We can't always broadcast those conversations out to the world, but at this moment, I'd like to be able to bring that forward. And then I also want to say, like, no matter what we decide to do as a community, let's bring something to Buffalo, something transformative. And I do think that I'm challenging my community to do some research. There's a lot more that comes when projects like this come, no matter what the project is, but it is going to require mobilization in more than one way. It's going to require conversations with more than just one entity, more than one person. It's going to require more than one face at the front of those conversations. It's going to require more than one way of thinking of things. So I want to push anything today is interdependence as a community, as a larger Buffalo community, and it should not have to be a tragedy for us to do that.
Absolutely. And as you both mentioned, this is the opportunity for something brand new, something that possibly isn't heard of, but at the end of the day, something historical for the city of Buffalo. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. This is Dejia James with Partnership for the Public Good, or PPG, uniting over 380 organizations to make a better Buffalo and Western New York region. We thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel if you made it this far in the video. Share it with somebody, have them like and subscribe. We thank you so much for tuning into our new season of The Public Good, and we will see you again very soon. Thanks.